We acknowledge and pay our respects to the Garner people, the traditional custodians whose ancestral lands we live and work on. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of the Garner people to country, and we respect and value their past, present, and ongoing connection to country, and their cultural beliefs. We extend that recognition and respect to all Aboriginal and First Nations people. Welcome back to Amy and I'm Amy Matthews and I am here today with Abby Guy.
Hi.
And Justina Ashman.
Hi.
And we are continuing Life Writing Month. And as we said at the top of the month, none of us are experts in life writing. So we're really lucky today to be joined by an actual expert, Dr. Emma Maguire, who Justina and I know reasonably well because she was originally at Flinders doing her PhD. She's now an academic at JCU and she publishes a lot on various forms of life narratives. And as we're going to see when we have a chat to her, those are a lot more complicated than we think. Like there are so many different kinds of life narratives out there. And Emma has written on a lot of them. If you're curious about her, you can pop onto the JCU, Sir James Cook University webpage for Dr. Emma Maguire, and you can have a look at all her publications. She's just a lovely person, very has this capacity to say really intelligent things in ways that everyone can understand, which I really admire. So we're about to head over and talk to Emma. Thanks for joining us today, Emma. We're so thrilled to have you.
Thank you.
I haven't seen you for a very long time, but so Emma you were at Flinders when I first went to Flinders doing your PhD. And I have to say, you feel like you're in the fabric of Flinders. I still think of you when I think about going into work. So, I was wondering if you could give us a bit of background on your work, because I know that you did your PhD in this area, but then you've gone on to do lots of exciting, interesting things, and you collaborate with a lot of people and you do a lot of different projects. So I was wondering if you could tell us about your experience with researching life writing.
Absolutely. So I, yes, started my academic career at Flinders as a PhD student, and honestly, it was one of the best times of my life. Not only for, I think, the research experience, obviously intellectually incredibly satisfying, and we had a really big group at the time of life narrative scholars, kind of generated by Kate Douglas and Kylie Cardell, who Kate Douglas was my supervisor, and then Kylie eventually ended up coming on as my secondary advisor. But they built a really, really amazing community. And so we're really kind of the biggest concentration of life narrative scholars at any one university in the country. And so it was really, really lucky time, I think, to do my research at Flinders. And yeah, just in terms of like a personal experience as well, I think for those of us when we start a PhD, we're completely different at the end of that process. So yeah, my PhD research was on digital autobiography, actually, by girls and young women. So I was particularly interested in how girlhood is constructed and performed in digital spaces. So I remember when I first started, I was looking at too many ranges of media. I was interested in blogs, online diaries. I was interested in cam girls. I also really delved into zines and ended up going down this rabbit hole into zines and kind of the relationship between zines and online diaries through the work of one particular zinester, Alex Rack. I think I was most interested in and kind of called to that arena because I was interested in at the time. So this is like mid 2010. So I started my PhD in 2012, finished it in 2015, graduated 2016. And at that period of time, the digital realm was really, really different to what it is now. I think now it feels quite hectic. It feels like maybe a bit of a dark place. Whereas I think in this era, there was this kind of trend towards self-representation as a mode of engaging digitally, whether that was through vlogging or blogging, or social media, which was still kind of new back then.
Yeah.
And I was so
I remember going to see you give a paper where you were first sort of starting to talk about social media, and it just feels like it's gone at breakneck speed. Like you blink and suddenly it's a new world.
100%. Yeah. And I think it was really interesting time, I think, to be working in that area and just seeing things change so quickly. But I think that it's still true that when young women in particular represent themselves online, it's contentious. People don't like it for some reason. They want to pick holes in them. They want to tell you this is not your space. Go somewhere else where girls are kind of to be seen and not heard, essentially. And I was so interested in kind of the young women, girls and young women that I was seeing around me representing themselves and saying, no, I'm going to take up space. This is who I am. And it was through, in a way, I was interested in the way that they were actually consciously shaping those representations and how they presented
Mm.
themselves online, um, in a way that I think, I don't know, sometimes we just see it and we think, oh, it's automatic, right? The person that I'm seeing
Yeah.
on the screen is the person. But that's such a small part of it. And through this kind of process of mediation and mediating the girl self, I just became really fascinated in and actually quite enamored by girls as I think leading the charge really in this era and in every technological shift beforehand. Since digital technology has been around, it's girls who are the innovators and they're doing it to self-represent. And people are interested and taking cues from that initial work, but they're often not valued for it. So I think
That's
that's
really interesting. Do you think there's so many questions I have. Like one is around the shift in girlhood from millennials to Z's, like that they're different digital natives, right? And then I was thinking about Taylor Swift and that girlhood that persists into adulthood. And then I was also thinking about a world now we live in where we've monetized those constructions of girlhood. So I don't even know where to begin with any of that. But if any of that snags you're interested, you want to talk about.
all of it, all of it. Yeah, I was really interested, even at the time, like the monetization of the self and what I
Mm,
ended up kind of looking at as the commoditization of the self
yeah.
was it was really quite new. It felt like when I was researching that, I was like, oh, this is a bit hot. Like
Mm.
people haven't figured out how to do this yet. And there was still kind of this is in the days of kind of Instagram before videos, right? When I was doing this research. So it was all about kind of presenting that perfect image. And there was still kind of spaces where you couldn't quite tell if someone was an influencer. We didn't have that term quite yet. It was just starting to come into parlance by the time I finished my PhD, or if they were presenting an authentic life narrative. But that commoditation was, I think, something that's fascinating because I think when we think, oh, like people are monetizing their self-images, our impulse is to kind of think, oh, that cheapens the self-image. That makes it actually less valuable. It makes it fake or inauthentic in some way. But I think when I started looking at it through the lens of media theory, feminist media theory in particular, and life narrative theory, you come to actually unpick how, and actually to realize that commoditization is part of every textual economy, right? Like
Mm. And
it
usually girls are commodified by others, not themselves.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So there was this kind of agentic impulse, I think, in what girls and young women do when they say, I'm going to create the image and I'm going to monetize my own self-image. I'm going to use that in ways that it has been used by others in the past.
That's so fascinating what you're saying about like authenticity as this reaction to this perceived commoditization, because then the new authentic representation becomes commodified, and it's just this cycle that continues to go.
It absolutely is. And I think that's long fascinated me. And I've never ended up coming to a place where I feel like I can write about it because I think it is one of those really like moving targets. But it is the case that like every time something kind of is coded as authentic, it then goes through this transition where it becomes suspicious and people start to adopt it. Instead of becoming authentic and spontaneous, it becomes a convention and something that shapes kind of like a vessel or kind of, I don't know, outline that we can then step into to say, I'm being authentic when I'm telling you this. And then people realize, oh, no, it's a shape that people are stepping into to tell us they're authentic, must not be authentic anymore.
Yeah, it's interesting because we're equating authentic with like unique original, like
Mm.
that we don't have a shared language or a shared experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it is different. And I think that when like the visual enters the picture as well, which is why I've kind of looked at textual and visual representations in my thesis, when the visual steps into it, that for some reason becomes a lot more blurry. Whereas I think
Mhm.
that when it's textual, there's a lot more room for interpretation, I think, and kind of a flexibility of interpretation of what reads as authentic or
I
whether.
think that's really interesting because recently there was, it's not so much at the moment, but there was a move of girls moving to Substack where they could have conversations and post their life writing on Substack and kind of had that back and forth there because there's no visual medium really in terms of the self. Which I found really interesting there is that separation. They're not writing or talking on TikTok, they're moving on to Substack.
So is that almost like a kind of, it's like Substack is like a retreat, like you're like,
Yeah,
oh,
or they're retreating to like just classic blogging.
Yeah, that's what I was about to
Yeah.
say. That sounds like going back to blogging. Like, yeah,
yeah, it
Mm.
reminds me of like Live Journal and those.
Yeah,
pull
yeah.
one out for live journal. I wanted to Abby was
No,
literally
you
about to
go,
speak
Jeffrey.
because
I still haven't. The
I wanted
pot
to
is still
point
baking.
I wanted to point to Abby because Abby's research is looking at online spaces and girlhood and how it's interacting with men in online spaces.
Oh my gosh.
I don't have a
Oh
question
my
about that.
gosh.
I was just
Yeah,
like,
we're just
Abby.
putting you on the spot, Abby.
Yeah, well, talking about authenticity, I'm really interested. Well, to talk to what I am researching, I'm looking at the romantasy genre, but I'm looking at how women are writing men in a world of manosphere. And then in looking at that, looking at kind of what kind of Amy's helped me coin as the girlosphere, which I guess is what you would be calling all of these life writing spaces. And I'm really interested in how the manosphere is different to the girlosphere in the way that girls are representing themselves online versus the way that men are kind of creating this cult's not the right word, but
But it's not the right
yeah, exactly.
word.
Yeah. And so the girl space and the man space online is really different, but also the fact that we call it the girl space and girlhood online as opposed to, and it's not boyhood online, it's men, the manosphere online, those sort of things. None of these are like questions for you. I'm just falling.
Well, first of all, I'm fascinated in your research. I want to hear all about it immediately. Sounds so amazing. I love the term the girlosphere. I think that's brilliant. And I feel like it really is. Like those are kind of almost like polar places, right? They're
Yeah.
almost like defined by what each other is not. And I feel like the manosphere, like, oh my God, Abby, are you okay? Like I feel like it's
I
yeah.
did say to everyone when I started researching it, because I was to get into like manosphere spaces is actually because it doesn't automatically come up on my feed or anything, it's not being fed to me. And so I, from my experience, found it harder to get into the manosphere spaces that I wanted to, which is crazy considering how simple it is or how kind of easy it comes to the men in those
Too
spaces.
easily, too easily.
Yeah. And all of the spaces I was trying to get to are like shut down or blocked or which is great. But yeah, I did say when I started researching it that if I start, sounding really political in the wrong direction, people might need to, check in on me.
Yeah, if she starts asking us all our body count.
Yeah.
That's interesting
Calling people
alone
chat.
though, that just tying a couple of ideas together. When Emma, you were talking about early on, girls and young women are often at the forefront of technology, which has been true with ebooks. It's been true with, most tech, in the modern era. But one thing that's happened is that separation into bubbles, right? And you see when you were also talking about people's reaction to girls and the way they become targets, right? And I keep thinking about the minute Taylor Swift dates um, a footballer and some of the girls go into the football world, suddenly there's outrage, right? Like you don't belong here. This is not your space. I thought that was fascinating that there's this delineation of spaces in this online world. Like this is
Yeah.
you can be girls, but you have to be girls over here.
Yeah, get over there. Yeah, absolutely. There is highly policed online, and these spaces are highly policed. And I think that something, Abby, I was thinking of when you were talking about your manosphere, is that like these spaces, the internet in particular, has always been imagined as a space where girls don't belong. So I don't know if you remember way back in the days, the birth of the internet, kind of as we know it today, the internet bros, very much bros, came up with this list of like, this is what the internet is, this is what happens, this is how you behave on the internet. One of the rules of the internet was there are no girls on the internet. And this is something that has undergirded every digital space I have ever encountered. And it's not unique to digital spaces. It's I'm going to sound like a crazy feminist, but like it is actually a part of like the patriarchal culture that's developed the internet. That's part of every patriarchal space is that there are no girls here. Um, and it's
Except as sexual commodities, right? They're everywhere, but only in a certain way, and they have no agency and no voice.
yeah, absolutely. And that's I think where like when you look at yeah, what that means, like there are no girls on the internet, we look at the term girl. And it's like it can have different meanings. And I think in the girlosphere, it's like a subjectivity, it's a subject. In the manosphere, it's an object. And I think that the way, like when an actual girl enters either of those spaces, because of kind of the rules of the space, that's how they're received and how their kind of self-representation has to negotiate particular things. Are they a subject or are they an object? And so in these spaces where they can represent themselves, they're taking on subjectivity, which is something that's maybe not allowed or not possible in other
That's
arenas.
that's also so fascinating in terms of like I found that I mean growing up as a millennial like 90s early 2000s kid, like the online spaces that I was first falling into online were predominantly, if not entirely in my experience, full of girls, and they were often fan spaces, and that was also where a lot of that, as you were saying, like technological, I suppose, innovation was coming from. Like so many like bloggers and like people building entire fan fiction websites and databases and archives and platforms, and a lot of this was being done by girls, but because it's in a fan space, because it's girls, it's like cringy, and in some ways it's almost protected because the cringiness means that like people don't want to, like people outside of that space don't want to interact with it, which means you can sort of just be in your bubble.
Absolutely. And I think the fangirl is such an interesting and cool kind of, it's almost like an identity. It's like something you can adapt as part of your identity is that fangirl. And I think it's a beautiful space, not just of kind of cultural consumption, which is a way that it kind of had been looked at, but a way of like production and a way of engaging with culture and producing new things through the lens of the self and saying the way I see the world matters actually as a fangirl
Yeah.
of
Yeah,
the way I read and understand texts.
that's exactly right. Like that's something that you see sometimes people talk about the way that it is, oh, just to pick a famous fandom out of thin air, like a Star Wars. Like there's a stereotypical male Star Wars fan who is interested in knowing trivia, in knowing details, in being able to memorize facts about the world. And then a perhaps again stereotypically female fangirl of Star Wars is like engaging with it in how it's speaking to their own experiences in their own life and how they're seeing themselves in and around text, or putting themselves into text, which is a really fascinating, like, I don't know, merging of that life writing mode and that fan media consumption.
Yeah, it was a way of extending the text, really,
Mm.
where it's like when you're appreciating, you stay in the text and about this text and the details of the text. It's not, it's kind of like a closed loop. Whereas when you're taking it into your own life and kind of you use it in a way that helps you understand who you are and to communicate to others who you are, I think that is a way that extends the text in a really interesting way.
I have two questions now. So I'm going to do one first. First one is around then fan fiction, which is another, girlosphere space and has been, and the self-insert. Like, does that stretch into life writing as well once we're in self-insert fan fiction?
That's that's a really good question. I would say, I mean, the easy answer is no, because the writer is going, I'm
I'm
writing.
entering a fantasy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm writing fiction, but I think the more interesting answer is maybe
maybe.
and kind of. And I think that that is something that it's a pertinent question because I feel like that's kind of what we're seeing. The biggest trend in life writing, like over the last decade or so, is these kind of we're kind of calling them like slashy kind of
Yeah,
genres. Like
yeah.
it's not quite autobiography, but it's not quite fiction or it's not quite theory. Because so we're kind of seeing the proliferation of things like auto theory and auto fiction as modes that are interesting and kind of feel like they're doing something new. Yeah, they don't quite have that same relationship to truth or the facts
Yeah.
as Like a memoir might.
like the new Lena Dunham TV series, Too Much, right? Which is clearly signaled constantly that it's drawing from her life and her relationships. That's what all the interviews are about. That's so it's like in that get to have your cake and eat it too space.
1,000%, absolutely. And so like I'm thinking also people like Rachel Cusk and
Yep.
um Sheila Heti as well. Vidgis Hjorth, I think, has actually produced one of the most interesting. Oh gosh, I don't know how to describe this work. It's quite intense. So it's about kind of a character who she's a Norwegian writer. It's based on her life, and she writes the story of an adult woman who is telling the story of confronting her family with allegations of sexual abuse against the father who has just died. What happens is the family kind of splits in two, half believe her, half don't believe her, and that's essentially the premise of the story. But after it came out, her sisters actually came out and said, this is not the true story. We don't agree with this. Even though like the book is published ostensibly as a novel, but they're kind of the links to real life were undeniable. And so much so that her family felt that they needed to come and write their own story. So we get kind of the sister writing her own account of what
Yeah.
happened. And then Victor Stewart kind of trying to negotiate that. There were legal dramas. It was, yeah, a bit of a scandal. But I think that case is interesting because it shows that even in modes of autofiction, which we think, oh, writers must kind of adopt those to escape some of those ethical conundrums. I can
Mm.
represent other people and I can get out scot-free. No, that's not the case. Readers are constantly looking for those threads to real life. And I think that happens when we read fiction, even.
That's yeah, where you see those disclaimers that are like any similarities between people real or, so that people are reading purely fiction works and seeing themselves in it and being like, hang on a second, that's not what
Yeah.
I remember.
Also, when we all get up at writers' festivals and go, "This is based on so and so," like my mother or my grandmother, even though it's got that disclaimer. My other question is another like crazy feminist moment where I think we're all happy to live on a daily basis, and it's around the complicating this idea of girlhood and how it fits into existing systems. Because it seems to me one of the things that is excluded from the girlosphere is adult and older women who are particularly don't fit any patriarchal ideas of being the fuckable woman, right? So I'm thinking about I came up in the romance community who were very technological very early on.
Mm.
And were, in ebooks, indie books, fan spaces. There were a lot of online blog spaces, a lot of chat rooms, a lot of all that stuff. But they were older women, they were women over 50 and have remained kind of unnamed and invisible. I think when we think about technology, we do not think of older women as being in this tech space. So if girls aren't allowed, older women are absolutely dead. They are invisible, right? They don't exist. And I was just wondering whether you've encountered much on sort of older women, because even now, like older women get on Facebook, everyone gets off, right? It's kind of an older woman's space now.
I don't know. It's not an area that I've kind of like been drawn to. I think because I study
Mm.
predominantly youth, but I
Yeah.
definitely have some thoughts about this.
Yeah.
So I think that you're right. I think that there is kind of an like exclusionary, and I think particularly when we're talking about the internet, which I think we're like for some reason forever, we always think it's new. Even now it's been around
Yeah.
for a
Yeah.
long time. We always think this is new. And it must be for young people. And I think that mirrors kind of real world spaces where we think wherever the young people are, that's where new exciting things are happening. And that's so unfortunate because I think it overlooks other
Mm.
communities who are doing new and interesting things. And you're right, it does make them kind of invisible. But I think that like over the last few years, I feel like I'm like some of my favorite books are written by older women.
Mm.
Thinking of like the Deborah Levy trilogy, some of like Helen Garner's
Yeah.
works. I just love like, and I love like older women writing specifically about womanhood.
Yeah.
I think that's one of my favorite genres at the
Because
moment.
I do think there's still a thing about power belongs to youth with women,
Mm.
whereas with men it doesn't. Like, in fact, one of the things, the manosphere culture is upset about is they're young men who don't have power. right? But then what is the power of girlhood? Like, how are they constructing it themselves? Sorry, Justine.
Oh, this might be a tangent, but I've
That's
also
fine.
just been wondering if part of this is coming from like increasingly people having to tie their real life self and real life identities to their online self and online identities. I feel like when I was growing up, at least a lot of the online spaces I was in, because I was reading fan fiction and reading live journal blogs, I was really fascinated with like most of the people I read were like, well, not older, I would say mid 20s and up, including into like 40s and stuff. I was reading people's fan fiction and blogs and writing from that. And I always felt cringy about being young. I was like, I was a serial lurker because I was like, I didn't want to be visibly a teenager online because I thought that was embarrassing. But I feel like now there's this policing around intergenerational friendships. There's a policing around
and relationships, that whole thing about what age gap
yeah,
is too big. Yeah.
yeah, and it's
Because
like
my best friend is 16 years older than me. Like
I had lots of friends older than me when I was younger, and now you would say a sentence like that, people would be creeped out by it. I don't know. It's weird, but I feel like as well as more you become attached to a real self online instead of a constructed online self. I wonder if that impacts it at all.
And what did text, like Emma, your opinion on that text versus image? Like I think back when it was more text based, it didn't matter what you looked like or what your age was.
Yeah.
People couldn't really tell. Whereas now the curation of image, and like you said, with feminist media scholarship, is like we have an existing language that is based around consumption of the female body, right?
Yeah, I think that a couple of things come to mind. So I'm thinking of when you said talking about kind of the text-based versus image-based, and then kind of those older instances of the internet. For some reason, what popped into my head were those awful chat rooms that we were all on when we were too young to be on them. And the first request, like the way you would open a conversation, was A/S/L. What's your age? What's your sex? What's your location? And I'm certain that
It's
those
so
things,
dodgy now. Like, can you imagine saying to your 12-year-old, put up your age, sex, and location the minute you get on?
like I'm certain those spaces were filled with pedophiles.
Yeah,
We
I'm
were
sure.
all in such danger. But I saw this TikTok recently, and it was a girl going, "Oh, like yeah, we were in these chat rooms which were like full of pedophiles. Yet somehow I've never felt like that was one of the safest spaces I've felt in my life because there was somehow this kind of distance, I think, and a detachment from reality that gives
Yeah. There was
illusion.
no sending photos back
Yeah.
then. Do you know, like I think because
I
it
think
was
that was
so
too slow.
text.
The technological limitations
Yeah.
could not send images.
Yeah. So I think you did have a lot of control,
I
right?
feel like I grew up through the transition of everything being text based, and also to the point where, like, I don't know, I'm sure people still do it, but the education was so strongly like, don't use your real name, don't use your real age, don't use your real location, never reveal, never put a photo, like, don't put any actual traceable information about yourself online.
Mm.
And then with social media, I think it turned very quickly from that to people
Meaning
going
where
out
they
one
live
night.
where. Yeah,
Yeah, or
that's
like they'll
right.
go out with their friends one night and then immediately post online an entire like 60 photo album of all the photos they took.
Yeah.
And it's
Or they're
just like,
actively
yeah,
posting while they're in that location
Yeah.
yeah.
and tagging said location.
And people posting their kids' photos from
Mm.
birth and yeah.
Yeah, well, I think it's because there is that kind of, I don't know, like during that time when social media began to take off, it was and began to be normalized, was a kind of a like it happened quite quickly that we found mobile technology. And so the internet
Mm.
was with us when we were everywhere. And it felt
Mm.
very like there was this almost like rush of excitement, I think, within the culture of kind of this reporting from the field almost. And it was this idea that the internet wasn't some other place. It was becoming a lot more enmeshed with our lives. And so I think, Justina, you're right. There is kind of something that happens with how we conceive of our identities, not necessarily the identities themselves, but how we understand them as either attached to or some in kind of some variant proximity to that kind of representation online. Is that us? Is that a part of us? Is it an authentic representation of us? Is it just us? Do we think of it as, yes, online me is just me? And I don't know, I feel like that conversation does open up all of those really exciting and interesting, I don't know, identity enmeshment questions.
Yeah. And it's got to be different depending on whether you've grown up with it or at what age you were when you entered the space. So
And what
interesting.
internet and what spaces? Like, I think that was
Yeah.
the thing that I found most about studying digital spaces is that like the conventions and affordances of the individual platforms shape what is possible on there.
Yeah.
And then
Without
they
being
shift as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those conventions also shift and change. Like um, I was a, I was the what people today might call a Tumblrina, very much on Tumblr, which is a super text-based platform, even though there are photos and things on there. And there's a weird resistance on Tumblr where TikTok was becoming more and more popular because I feel like people almost felt threatened by video becoming the norm, the way people communicate over text. I don't know. It was very interesting to witness like both the resistance on that platform to video, and then also, yeah, just the way that I would then watch TikToks where I would like, oh, people used to share these opinions, but without a face or a name or a voice to it, and now it's so like there's no hiding behind like a text.
Yeah, and I think voice changes. Like we're thinking about kind of the qualities of mediation and kind of narrative. It's about like in a written medium, voice has to do so much work. And I think that's the joy of spaces like Tumblr or LiveJournal or Substack is like it's a space to develop that voice. And I feel like you're really attentive to how you're mediating yourself through voice. Whereas it's different. That's maybe not as powerful, not as central to like a visual representation. It's still important, but there are other things that can signify you, like what your hair looks like, what your background looks like, the kind of, yeah, the topics that you talk about, etc.
And even mannerisms like while we were recently in Hobart for a conference, the one that gave us all a deathly illness.
Yeah.
And I remember one night me, Abby, and Peyton, who is not here but is another one of the hosts of the podcast, doing the TikTok influencer trying food for the first time. And
Oh
it's
God.
like, it's such a specific mannerisms that you imitate and like words and phrases that it's like, it's also, yeah, exactly. They're like, and then like, it's interesting that, yeah, even that is like this construction of like you're sharing a self or a moment with the online space, but you're starting to fall into like conventions of communication, even though it's a video form.
Well, they're memes. Like I feel
Yeah.
like this is the conversation that I was having with someone recently about kind of self-representation on TikTok. And I'm like, oh, we're actually like turning ourselves in. It's like we used to share images of other things as memes, and there would be a self-identification kind of, this is who I am, I'm laughing at this meme. But now actually the memes are gestures.
Yeah.
Right? And so we understand them and we actually step into and embody those memes, like that stupid like there's so many mannerisms. I feel like even like some of the things influencers do with their hands online, like that gesture.
Even down to just how the inflection of their voice sounds,
Yes, the
like
inflection of
influencer
the voice.
voice. Yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh, my partner hates it because I watch quite a lot of TikTok, and my partner will be going around the house and he's like, "Oh my gosh, it's that woman again." I'm like, "Oh, Lord, Kayla, it's great." I don't judge her. Like, but he doesn't like for him it stands out, whereas to me it doesn't. I don't know because I'm on there all the time. I think you just become accustomed to those conventions. But yeah, that vocal modulation is interesting on TikTok.
I have a question for you, Emma, because actually it's been something I've been thinking about in terms of, say, Instagram. Um, my Instagram's changed a lot, but I've not gone back and deleted old things because I almost feel dishonest doing that. But I've been like, I always toss up between the idea of like, oh, do I want to start like a separate book Instagram or a separate writing Instagram or a separate, or like not even Instagram or like just separate platforms to like compartmentalize the different parts of myself and how you want to present it and who you want to interact with it. And then I think it was like somewhat recently you made an Instagram about how you weren't going to be doing that anymore, that all of these are part of yourself, so they're all on the same account. I wonder what was like, yeah, what was your thinking process behind doing that, and have you found that, like, is it difficult, or do you still feel tempted to segregate things?
Oh my gosh, that was such an interesting experiment. Thank you for asking me about it. I ended up, I started like a little Bookstagram account because I thought, oh, I just really want a place where it's just talking about books. Like books is always like I read a lot, I blab about writing a lot and like reading a lot. And I thought oh, it'd be great to have like a unique space that was like an Emma's book identity. And there I felt like there might have been I don't know, I feel like there was maybe the promise of some sort of liberation from the rest of my life. And I didn't have to be the other Emma. I didn't necessarily even have to be like an academic. I'm just a reader amongst other readers. And the reason that I ended up deciding to, I guess, close down that experiment was that it honestly felt like I was like going a little bit, like I was overthinking it for sure. But I was like, where does the book me end? Where does Emma Reed's end? And where does the rest of Emma start? And I wasn't quite sure. It felt like, I don't know, it felt almost like a part of me had been taken out of me.
Yeah. But see, this is interesting because I do wonder how generational this is too. Like this sense of this quest for an authentic, integrated identity, right? Whereas for me, I feel like I don't always feel comfortable in the online, like on my Instagram, because I know it's my professional Instagram and I can't put up like I don't feel like I want to give the entire world access to my private life. Or even I want to keep some things that are just mine because you feel like a lot gets taken from you or you're sharing a lot with the world. And maybe that's okay that not every single person needs to have access to every facet of you. Do you know, like at work, they get one bit of you, family gets one bit of you, but that does feel like a anxiety, maybe like a contemporary anxiety. And I do wonder about, we'll go back to Taylor Swift, like now that she's getting married, when she becomes a mother, how's that going to change her identity that we're also into? Like everyone has these kind of almost fixed identities now. Yeah, it's really interesting. I find it really interesting.
Amy, I'm so glad you brought that up. So the multiplicity of identity, the idea that like identity is multiple and maybe not a single unitary coherent, like it's actually a relatively new idea, comes from like the postmodern thinkers. And so it is like you're right, it's a contemporary concern about like, oh, like I'm a mother and I'm also
Yeah.
a writer, and those two identities might like not always meet. Maybe it's a Venn diagram. And they
Yeah,
meet,
yeah, yeah.
but
Because
not
I
all.
think men always like, I mean, we're saying always, 20th century, mid 20th century masculinity, for example, if it was white, straight, hegemonic, it was the idea of you're the dude. You just go out in the world, the family happens, but that's who you are. Whereas when you're a woman, if you became a mother, you're a mother. That's what you are. And so I think we got very fixed in the 20th century around having a role. And that's why when women got jobs, everyone was like, whoa, how can she be both things at once? How can you do that? How can you be more than one thing? So yeah, I think it is really interesting watching us on even the tiles, even if you open up an app and you see all the tiles of like this idea of how I curate them so that you get the best sense of me, right? Like there is a best sense of me.
Oh, yeah. And and that has always been a part of like being in public, and particularly for women and young women who are visible in particular ways. Like that has always been kind of a consideration. I heard about like coming across this concept from marketing. And it's called, and they call it impression management. And it's about like how do customers like
That is such a great neoliberal term, impression management. I love it.
impression management. And I was like, yeah, that's how do like potential customers interact with your brand? What's their impression and how can you manage that? And I was like, like girls and women do that all the time. Like we are masters at impression management.
I've heard people talk about their personal brand when they talk about social media.
Yeah.
What's my personal brand?
I was just going to say, I feel like that comes into the like commodification of it all, where you're selling yourself, so you have a brand.
In some ways is this kind of language, because I find it sometimes like I really hate that when people talk about being a content creator, for example, as opposed to like an artist or a musician or a writer or etc. video maker. But I wonder if part of this like words like personal brand and impression management and content creator, like these commodified marketing terms, are really just making it unavoidable and apparent what is happening anyway, even if weren't using that language. Like this is the way people's images are being like sold and marketed and spread. It's just making it part of the surface level rather than having to be something we pretend isn't happening.
I totally agree with you. I've noticed this word content kind of come up in culture to describe creative artifacts. And I can't get on board with it. I just hate the idea that, because I feel like to me, content is like it's almost like a placeholder, right? And it's from the point of view of someone who is potentially creating like a platform or a marketplace. or a structure.
Mm.
And it doesn't matter what that content is, what these creative artistic artifacts are, they just need to fill a space. And quite often online, it is in order to make that space financially viable or to make it into a marketplace, to, yeah, I guess facilitate that circulation of commodities. And so to me, like content, when we call artistic creation content, I think it does in a way, I don't know, it just like we're kind of like pulling a little bit closer to kind of those, yeah, I don't know, there's
Mm.
a capitalist view of
That's
art.
a great point. Like, yeah, because these platforms like Instagram and TikTok, etc., they don't have a product to sell. The product they're selling is us
They're
and the
outsourcing
content that
the
we
content.
create. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I'm going to botch this, but I read this morning, I've on Instagram, I got led to it, and Hannah Arendt article that is about productivity, where she was saying that meaning will be replaced eventually by productivity. It's from her 1958 book, The Human Condition. I've been obsessed with this all day today. But she divides us into three, there's three stages of kind of, I guess, activity. So she talks about labor, work, and then action. And for her, action is kind of the higher level one that is an artistic
Mm.
outpouring, like it's a personal expression. And about how she was saying eventually capitalism will get to a point where it all bleeds down to labor. So labor is about subsistence. It's about just so, and when we're talking about creating a space where you can commodify it, there's this scarcity, right? Like there's this sense of I need to sell something and I have me. And it kind of reminds me like of going back to, I don't know, if you went back to Victorian England of having to sell yourself on the streets, right? This is what I have to sell, is this. It's just really interesting, I think, how you scratch the surface of your work, Emma, and it just reveals so much that needs talking about.
Oh, I know. And I feel like the like the economic and cultural aspect of self-representation has always, like, it underlies every single thing I investigate. I don't go there on purpose, but it seems to just always end up there in this space of how is labor involved here? Who is benefiting? Who has the power to buy or to sell, or to create or to consume? And that those, I guess, the more cultural questions are always linked to material structures. Um, yeah, and I think it's, I don't know, I don't want to bring up the A word, AI. It feels like every conversation is about AI. But I think that it's forcing us, it almost feels like a bit of a tipping point, and it's forcing us to think about this idea of content and what it is that we value about content, whether we value content or whether we value.
This might not relate. I'm just first draft thought. I'm really interested in how I'm not a big reader of life writing. I have started reading life writing this month. But when I think about it, I do read life writing. It's just not what I kind of thought life writing was. And I hadn't considered that online spaces are considered life writing. Like reading those Substacks, I'm reading people's like autofiction and their work. And I'm really interested in how quick the turnover is when you have life writing as an online space, as opposed to just the novels, as particularly when looking at it in a political sense. Like I know that you've done writing, Emma, on the Me Too movement and that sort of space online in this regard. And I'm just really interested in how the life writing online can speak to political matters much quicker than if you're looking at life writing in just a novel sense.
Absolutely. Oh, Abby, that's not a first draft thought at all. Polish is a beautiful question. Um, I think that a couple, yeah. So with the Me Too stuff, I think that might be a good place to start. So yes, the immediacy, and I'm thinking of as well, I might just pick up on kind of the like terminology, which I don't know if it's useful or not, but as scholars, we kind of have a like too fussy use of kind of various terminologies like autobiography, biography, life writing, life narrative. And so it can sometimes be helpful to think about kind of self-mediation as one kind of autobiographical engagement, life writing as anything that kind of does kind of pick up on the written form, autobiography as kind of emerging from the self and speaking of the self, biography as potentially one person speaking about another person or life. And then kind of this digital life narrative. I tend to use the word automedia because it's kind of a self-mediation. So when we think about the roots of the word autobiography, autobiograph is self-life writing, right? When we think about media, we take that kind of, it's a media that is kind of emerging from the self. And when we draw attention to the fact that it's mediated, it helps us to understand it. I think understand the complexities of what people are doing. So yes, I absolutely agree that you do consume a lot of life writing. I think you engage with a lot of life narrative or to media, whatever you want to call it. And like the political element of that, life writing, life narrative has always been used for political ends. It has been a way or a mode, I would say probably a mode of speech that people have used from the margins to speak to the center, right? To inform the center, hey, I'm out here as this identity. This is what's happening to me. You might not know about it, but it's unjust and it needs addressing.
I'm reading a lot of Palestinian memoir and life writing at the moment this month. Yeah.
Yeah, that's, I think, only going to explode further over the next decade. I think we're going to see a lot of testimony emerging from Palestine. And so it has always been a way, kind of like, yeah, life narrative as a mode of speech and being able to, yeah, being able to speak in various ways in culture. And so we take that over to the digital realm. In my kind of latest work, it really is all about sexual violence narratives and how it's shifted from kind of those misery memoirs from the 1990s to today, where we have kind of this proliferation of people of all kinds saying sexual violence has happened to me, and I want to address the public. I want to tell the public. I don't just want to keep it to my therapy session. There's, for some reason, you're compelled to take these stories to public spaces where it can kind of impact on culture. And kind of those digital forum, I think a lot about, at the moment, I'm thinking a lot about that period of kind of the mid 2010s as this really crucial tipping point. I remember being part of the Emerging Writers Festival, I think it was it was the Digital Writers Festival in, I think it was 2014, late 2014, early 2015. And I was on this panel about kind of like digital, I think it was about blogs. And I remember one of the things that I said, because keep in mind, this is 2015. I remember saying, we were talking about feminism, and I was like, one thing that I love about, and we'll always remember 2014 for, is that it was the year when saying I'm a feminist became okay. Like it became cool to be a feminist. And that was, I come back to that again and again and again, and thinking about kind of how digital and online feminism, or fourth wave feminism, some people might call it, how that has impacted on the culture in such, like, it has transformed our culture. And it's because of the internet. And like you say, Abby, that kind of rapid transition, but also like thinking about space. Like I remember like we'd be reading like personal testimony by people from the other side of the world the day after they'd submitted an article on Mamma Mia or Jezebel or whatever it was. And that mode of the personal was key to that era and how feminist change has been brought about, and honestly led by trans and Black women doing this feminist work and pushing that culture forward.
I was thinking the writer I think about as being very like of that feminist, making that feminist writing so much more, I guess, acceptable is Roxanne Gay.
Roxanne Gay.
yeah. Who was, and just like engaging with pop culture and feminism in this really open and unapologetic way, while also accepting that it's difficult to do anything perfectly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was like when, I don't know, like call out culture came up, and that has kind of, the movement kind of had to negotiate with that and what it meant for feminism and a feminist identity. And I think it's resulted in like the demand that feminism is opened up. White feminism isn't feminism. The demand that if your feminism doesn't speak for all women, and actually I think all people, if it doesn't aim to make life better for all people, it's not true feminism. And that is only an understanding that's become common because of those people who were working, creating content throughout that era that became viral and spread everywhere and completely changed the culture. And I am arguing in my new book led to Me Too. And that's where it And that's where I guess that movement kind of crested, and all sorts of things have happened since. But it's still there making change.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting thinking about how these new media, right, whether it's the printing press or the internet or TikTok, are ways that people can share information, and they're always political then. They're always like forces of change in some way or another.
Absolutely. And I think the self has such an interesting place in relation to that kind of impulse towards creating change. And I'm always really interested in kind of the demand. It's almost become a demand now, I think, that like lived experience has as a form of proof or authority to speak on a particular issue. And I think in some ways it's kind of maybe given too much weight. Like, you can't speak on anything you don't have personal experience on. I don't necessarily agree with that, although there are important reasons why we need to examine who's speaking, why and about what, and what are they saying, what authority do they have to speak. But I think that like it's interesting and fascinating for a life narrative scholar to see lived experience as something that gives you authority to speak in public. And I think that that's like another condition of our age. I think that that's something that's kind of ingrained in the culture at the moment.
Can I do a quick pivot?
You can. We've got time for one more topic.
Back to something that you mentioned a while back, like at the start, about zines. I'm really fascinated with, and because I have a big love of zines, and I remember attending a workshop at the Emerging Writers Festival on autobiographical zine making, and I do think zines are weird in the way that they both can like really resist this commodification, because one of the things I love about them is that they are so unapologetically niche, and at the same time, they are experimenting in online spaces and in digital spaces simultaneously as being this like throwback to a pre-online like print culture. Yeah. Anyway, that's not really a question. Tell me about zines.
I have an answer. So I have to say, I am not the expert on zines, but I have done some work on zines. So I have one of my PhD students at the moment, Bianca Martin, is very well-known author of her own zine, and very well known as a big part of the zine community in Australia. So she is another fantastic person that you should get on your podcast to talk about zines. And also the life narrative scholar Anna Paletti, whose work has informed mine in so many ways. They actually started out as my secondary advisor for my PhD before, I don't know, changes happened at Flinders, I think, administrative ones, and I had to have someone who was an internal secondary advisor. But Anna Paletti has done some amazing work on zines. And I think that the thing that sticks with me about zines, and why I'm always still drawn back to them, is just the kind of the effect of the text. So these little like handmade things that can look any type of way and can say literally anything, can be authored by anyone, have absolutely no money-making agenda. They're literally just these kind of avenues for experimentation and what can I make. So I'm like always interested in the material culture and kind of how the effects of these, like we see, like they use the photocopier in interesting ways. They use like even kind of digital elements and artistic elements, and kind of how that kind of material artifact can kind of come to stand in for a self. Like, I know, Justina, if you've made zines before, you know, when you make a zine, it feels like putting a piece of you out into the world in the way maybe taking a selfie and posting it online does not.
And there's something about, I do make zines, and there is something about the experience of how zines are distributed that I find is so like unavoidably linked to the self. So I've done a few zine fairs, and it's incredible the way that people will talk to you about your zines. Like, and I don't even mind if they don't buy anything. They'll pick it up, they'll flick through it, and then they'll share an experience from their life that your zine reminded them of. I had a zine at the last zine fair I attended called "Instead of Preparing for the Zine Fair, I Had a Dental Emergency." And it was all about again, a dental emergency I'd had instead of being able to make a new zine for the zine fair. And I just whipped this together the night before on a single A4 sheet and photocopied it that morning. And then so many people would come and talk to me then about their dental emergency or their friend's dental emergency. And I was like, I don't know what I expected when I made this zine, that I would be hearing people's dental horrors all day. But it was actually weirdly like delightful that so many people will then jump off of your sharing of yourself to share themselves.
Absolutely. And I think even when zines aren't directly personal, like that might be about a topic rather than telling an experience from my life, there is something in the way that we receive them and the way we understand them and the way that they circulate that is personal. And I think in interesting ways is like a bit anti-digital. And so I think that's yeah, I don't know. We could talk a long time about zines as well.
Yeah.
Running out of time.
We should definitely do a zine month, I think. Emma, thank you so much for joining us. I feel like we didn't even scratch the surface, really. We could talk for hours, but hopefully we've whetted everyone's appetite, and you can go look up Dr. Emma Maguire and find her work. What's your latest thing you published? Have you got an article or a book?
Yes, I've got an article out at the moment. It's just about to come out, like in the next few days.
Oh,
I think.
perfect. We'll
Yes.
post a link if you want.
In the AB Autobiography Studies Journal, all about activism.
Oh, excellent. That sounds amazing. Okay, so if everyone wants to go look up Emma, you can find her at JCU. You can go look up her page and see everything that she has published. We'll try and put a link on Insta so that you can find her. Thank you so much for joining us, Emma.
Oh,
thank
Amy,
you.
Abby, and Justina, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Well, we really could have filled
What
3
a
hours.
delight.
Yeah, we could have filled 3 hours there.
Everything she says, it's like, oh my gosh, it just sparked 5 more thoughts.
Yeah, I do think there's stuff around, like we didn't really get to dive into, like it comes with its own hegemonies, right? The girlosphere, and the minute you set up conventions, they become calcified a little bit, and people are always left out.
I really wanted to bring up the term thought daughter as well, because the current online like girlosphere that breaks into Substack, they often call themselves thought daughters, which kind of indicates that they're the daughter or they're the child or they're the one in the family who has these deep thoughts and this deep thinking, and they're a thought daughter and they need to put these thoughts out into the world, but they're all writing the same things, and it's very interesting.
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
just so sorry. I'm just so constantly, as an older woman, astonished how older women are just like pushed out the door constantly.
I was going to say that thought daughter is, it sparked 2 thoughts for me because I'm a thought daughter. No,
Yes,
because
well, yes, we're
like
all thought daughters.
I'm a thought mother.
the pushback against the idea of a thought daughter, which was like, there was like a meme on TikTok for a while, which was, I thought, completely unhinged, where people would go up to people and ask if they would rather have a gay son or a thought daughter, which I was like, I know this is a joke, but also it is so telling that these like, I don't know, it is so telling about the patriarchal cultures that we live under. This is the question you're asking people.
It also feels really pretentious and like classist in some ways. Like I've just Googled kind of what is a thought daughter, just to kind of give a better summary than what I did. And it pretty much just refers to someone who's introspective, intellectual, devout overthinkers. They're really in touch with their emotions and empathy. And I'm like, why is that a classification of a person? But it has become this thing online that I'm a thought daughter. There's like, you know, people put up a poem and they're like thought daughter.
That's
It's
so
really interesting.
So there's levels of irony though every time you go on the internet too, right? It's like you get to, because I found that with the guys I grew up with in the 90s, like the bro dudes of the 90s, it was like they could get away with anything by going, I'm being ironic. Like, don't you have a sense of humor? And again, you can get away with kind of elitism, I don't know, sexism, white supremacy, all kinds of things. I'm just being ironic.
The go-to these days is it's satire, and I feel like we need to have a satire month and have Peyton explain to people what satire is.
Yeah, 100%.
But the other thing it made me think of is I read Theory and Practice by Michelle de Kretser recently. It's very like that idea of being a daughter and like daughterhood and motherhood and the relationship between daughter and mother is so like prevalent throughout that book, in both in terms of like her own relationship with her own mother, and the idea of as her mother gets older that she becomes a mother to her mother, and then also talking about her research into, because the book is over her research into Virginia Woolf, and who she refers to as the wolf mother, which I found
Yeah.
delightful. But it's that idea of that, like, where generations of like thoughts of like feminist thinking and
Yeah.
living and like how we interact with previous generations. And I found that an interesting theme. So it's interesting to me that there are people doing these like life writing substacks calling themselves thought daughters, because I
Yeah.
wonder how much they think about who the mothers are and whether
Well, and
that comes
then
into it at all.
again, that idea of being having one identity or multiple identities is that you can be both and neither, right?
Mm.
You can be both mother, daughter,
Yeah.
anything, or you can be none of it. It's really interesting. I just think we have a very curated idea of roles that we put women and people into, right? Like
Mm.
if you get slotted into a role, then that's it. And it kind of actually reduces people's ability to be complex and human.
Mm. I feel like we're still like, as much as people have been pushing back against this categorization of women as virgin, whore, or mother, like we still haven't figured out a way to escape it, because this like thought daughter versus thought daughter dichotomy is that virgin whore dichotomy. It's the not like other girls thing in some ways, and at the same time, then anyone who is, as you say, Amy, in that unfuckable range just becomes
Yeah.
mother, and then what does that
Yeah.
even mean?
Or not
Like,
even. Do you know, like
yeah,
the biggest
or just
horror we
invisible. Yeah.
have is for the spinster, unfuckable woman who might have needs and wants and desires and thoughts, and we really feel the need to silence those people.
Mm.
And it happens to all genders, really, like,
Mm.
and to particularly if you fall off the gender radar, right? If you're non-binary or you're trans or you're like, then you really, really are battling that, because there are also, we're really going down a tangent here, but
Yeah.
there are like acceptable ways to be trans and acceptable ways to be a trans woman, and there are ways where you are still fulfilling a patriarchal ideal of womanhood, so you're an acceptable trans woman, or like all of these things get mixed up in the ways we perform identity online.
I
I
mean,
think the image is key personally, because I think that we have adopted patriarchal ways of viewing women, and so the successful commercialized influencers often look a certain way.
Oh, yeah, I know. This isn't even related to the topic, but we could really get into how bad the physical image has got. We've gone backwards in terms of physical image online, which people are now starting to talk about how far backwards we've gone in how thin everyone is becoming.
And
oh yeah,
white,
and
often
also the way
white.
people talk about bodies versus when we were in peak body positivity era to now is like, so it's like, yeah, it's alarming. But the other thing I was going to say is that all this, I mean, it feels like what we're talking about is tangential, but that's the whole problem of life writing, right? Is that we have
Yeah,
so many different selves or parts of ourselves, a way of presenting ourselves, and like how do you turn that into like a piece of writing or art or media, and like what do you lose in the translation, or what do you find in the process? It's like so fascinating. Yeah.
that seems like the perfect way to end the episode. That was so wise, Justina.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Before we all go, I need to grab my book. Next week is book club. So we
Yay.
have Fiona Wright's The World Was Whole. Smashed it. I have like dog ears through it. I have highlights. It's so good. I cannot wait to talk to you guys about it. So if everyone hasn't started reading, start reading. I literally read it in 2 sittings. So it's another very readable, but very, I mean, you can go back and reread it. It's so dense. I think there's so much in it, but it's so easy to read. So grab your copy, get reading, and we'll talk about it next week.
Bye, see you there.
Bye.